Today, we want to talk about Air Force ROTC, the Air Force ROTC scholarship, the current status of Air Force ROTC in general, and, contrast it maybe with the Air Force Academy a little bit to see where we're at here. Air Force ROTC is getting ready to announce its last number of people who are going to get off the last Air Force ROTC board. Air Force Academy is sort of wrapping up its admissions offers. And so we're coming to the conclusion of another season of both scholarships and appointments to the Air Force Academy. But there's been a lot that's happened with Air Force ROTC this year that I think we need to talk about.
Looking forward to comparing and contrasting ROTC with the Academy. And looking back now, I'm not sure that I would have applied to Air Force ROTC if I knew then what I knew now when I was getting ready to apply for the Academy. Would you agree with the statement that if you want to become an Air Force officer and you're considering Air Force ROTC, that it's a good idea to have a backup plan?
Yeah, I'd say first is if you can get into the Air Force Academy and you get that appointment, you should take it. I don't think you should go Air Force ROTC, which we'll talk about. I think Air Force ROTC should be a backup to the Air Force Academy, and then you should consider reapplying to the Air Force Academy after a year of Air Force ROTC if you really want to be an Air Force officer. And we've talked in previous podcasts about the advantages of reapplicants. And frankly, I think that's probably a better route than just going through an Air Force ROTC program for a number of reasons that we'll get into here today.
What is the top reason, sir?
So Air Force ROTC, we have no idea how many scholarships are being given out this year. But what we've had two board releases so far. We had an October board that was strictly for Air Force ROTC, right? And that had a really low selection rate this year. We think around 60 to 70 people were selected off of this board. I can tell you that we worked with a number of candidates on this board, and I can tell you everybody who got a scholarship off of this board had high 14s or into the 1500s of SAT, 32 plus ACT scores, scholar athlete leaders. And I even had a candidate who had a 15 plus SAT who didn't get selected off of this board. To caveat that, this person was not doing what we call a technical major or what we call a highly desired or critical major for the Air Force ROTC. So this person might not have been selected because of that, but I had 15 plus SAT people who were doing languages or general studies who got selected off of that board. So these were people that would have easily gotten into the Air Force Academy if they had put in an application, but they got an Air Force ROTC scholarship. But there was a lot of people, I can tell you, that probably didn't get selected on this board that were solid candidates, 1,300 SAT, 1,400 SATs that were probably not selected off of that board. So we had this October board for Air Force that had a low selection rate. And then we had a Space Force board and that was supposed to go off in January that got delayed until early February. There was a delay to the Space Force board. The Space Force is supposed to have an additional interview called Higher View. And they're supposed to give you about 30 days notice before you do this interview with the Higher View. It usually happens around holidays. So the holidays came and went. There was nothing from Air Force ROTC. And then suddenly they gave the applicants around 20 days somewhere in January to get this thing done before the board met in early February. People who applied for the Space Force as part of the application were strung along with this interview, strung along for the board. The board was delayed. And then there wasn't a lot of scholarships given out in that board. I had one on this board of a couple that we were working with. This applicant was in the 1300s with SAT, a very, very solid candidate got it, but other applicants similar that we were working with didn't get the Space Force scholarship off of this board. So, and then I think another thing that came off of these first two boards was the first board, all the scholarships were called Type 1 scholarships, which is basically full tuition in any public or private college or university. And then suddenly on the Space Force board, they started giving out Type 2s, which is $18,000 a year for 4 years. Now, they had alluded to this in the application this year that they were going to be giving out Type 2 scholarships. With the first board, they didn't give out any. Then We got some rumor mill that said they were going to give out all types ones this year. And then now we're seeing type 2 with Space Force. And I imagine with this board that's going to be released here soon, we're going to see probably some type 2s come off of this third board. So we have 2 boards, thousands of applicants applying for the Air Force ROTC, and now only maybe 90 people being selected so far. So now we're sitting on April 15th. The final board was delayed. It was supposed to go off mid-March. It went off at the end of March with a mid-April release. So you've got a bunch of candidates now waiting on this April Air Force ROTC board. Very little communication coming out from Air Force ROTC at Maxwell Air Force Base. It's been just a really weird year, but a year that it's been very parsimonious for Air Force ROTC scholarships with no idea what's going to happen here in April. So that's an overview, Trish, of at least what's been going on here so far. The final thing I would mention is they rolled out this criticality measurement here. Before we had this thing called the highly desired majors, or they would be basically engineering and hard science majors were considered highly desired majors. That was about 70% of the scholarships. 10% of this were actually language majors. And then another 20% were general studies, meaning you could major in almost anything. So what they added this last year was this thing called criticality, where they gave a criticality level 1 to certain majors such as electrical engineering, computer engineering, meteorology, and for language, criticality level 1 for Russian and Mandarin. And then the rest of them were just given, other criticality, either 2 or nothing at all, so I don't know why they decided to do criticality level 1 to 4 when they only did criticality level 1 and some criticality level 2. So, and again, another confusion about what was this majors thing? What was the criticality? Is the criticality of any difference to selection? I've got no idea, nor is Air Force ROTC really giving you any clue here. So it's been a crazy year for Air Force ROTC scholarship people, with a lot of people just sort of waiting for this third board to come out, and who knows what's going to happen here, but it's not been a great year. I'll just put it to you that way. Yeah, they've got a captain or I've even seen as low as a first lieutenant run this program, along with, to be fair, with some government service folks that have been down there at Maxwell and this for some time. But being from the Army side of things and seeing the scholarship being run by 06s with basically colonels with significant oversight, it just seems like, at least the people running it at Maxwell, doesn't seem to have a lot of oversight or a lot of attention being paid to it. You even see spelling mistakes in their application manual. Like, for example, spelling Corps, Reserve Officer Training Corps, CORP, not putting the S on the end there. While that in and of itself is not necessarily indicative of the whole program, it just indicates that they're just not paying much attention to this thing. The impression you get is everything's changeable with this program. They change their guidance whenever they want. They change the selection criteria when they want to change it. And they don't really tell you when they're changing things. Their attitude, at least for this high school scholarship, seems to be, well, you put in your application, we'll tell you when you'll be selected if you're lucky enough to be selected. If there's a change in the board, or we need to do an interview with the Space Force board and it's delayed, it's just going to be delayed and we'll deal with it. I could tell you that candidates I worked with, I had to have them talk to the scholarship coordinators at Air Force ROTC several times to get clarification on things. So it's a really frustrating process with the Air Force ROTC scholarship program in general. It just strikes me as not having a lot of oversight.
They have the luxury of everybody wants to be a pilot. So people are willing to join Air Force ROTC not on scholarship because they want to join the Air Force. And it seems like there's a lot of non-scholarship contracted cadets that are competing to go to field training and to make it past their sophomore year. It seems like students will come to them whether or not they're on scholarship, and because of that, it negatively impacts the way that the program is run.
Right. In other words, the idea is they're going to get their people anyway, right? Either through this scholarship program or not. And so if they're going to get them that way, then why should they spend the money or put any significant effort out or any thought into the way that they're conducting this program? That's always been the feeling. I think in some years it's been different, but certainly this year, that's sort of really how it felt. Who knows how many scholarships are going to come out of this board? We think only 100's been given out so far. We've seen up to 1,000 being given out. Maybe this last board will have several hundred more scholarships given out, which will be, I think, a good thing. Now, most of them are probably going to, well, there may be a split of type 1, type 2, but my guess would be we may see more type 2s and type 1s given out, maybe a 50-50 split. You're looking at a lot of candidates going to these programs with $18,000 a year, taking, if they fell for criticality level 1 with a highly desired major, then they're looking at computer engineering, electrical engineering with an $18,000 scholarship going to colleges and universities nationwide. They could have, of course, have a type 1 where they're going to a high price school, but most of them are also going to be technical majors, taking engineering in
Now,
particular.
sir, a few questions for you. For students who accept that type 2 scholarship, are there any private colleges, expensive colleges who have incentives for students who earn the type 2 scholarship?
That's been something that has reemerged over this year. Really, what they're developed, at least with the type 2, was this trying to be able to maximize this type 2 scholarship. And so the way that we've done it through the studies that we've done and the incentive sheets that we've come up with is to find those states that where their public schools provide in-state tuition for out-of-state students if you're on an ROTC scholarship contract. So there's a number of states that have that. So that one example would be all the state schools in Texas. If you have a type 2 scholarship and you go to UT Austin and you sign that ROTC scholarship contract, you're going to be considered an in-state student, and that $18,000, along with maybe some financial aid you get or something, may then cover the tuition there. So there's a number of states that have that. There also may be some private schools that will match the $18,000 you get from Air Force ROTC to cover most of the tuition. But when you get that $18,000 a year scholarship, you're looking at things. What you need to do is when you're applying for colleges, you'll want to include some of those state schools from states that consider you an in-state student in order to be able to cover yourself in case you don't get a type 1 scholarship. And then for private schools where you can take Air Force ROTC, that's where you have that conversation with the financial aid office, telling them that you got that $18,000 a year scholarship, and ask what they can do to help bridge that gap with the tuition deficit, the delta between what they're charging for tuition and that $18,000. So yeah, so that's really what we're looking at here. So that's a significant management problem, given that the type 2 has been reinstituted here.
The demand for service in the Air Force is not going down. They still need the same number of officers. This is going to impact the number of officers that Air Force ROTC is able to commission due to the fact that fewer people are interested in the program because of the negative connotation that the program is getting at this point.
Air Force has enough candidates who are willing to go through the program as a non-scholarship cadet. Matter of fact, the money, as I understand it, for the in-college scholarship program may be declining also. So there may not be as much money in the future for scholarships on campus. But I think the Air Force's attitude here is this is one of our routes to get cadets into ROTC, I mean high school scholarship program. But if we don't get as many, or we cut back the money and we have less applicants, then we'll get them other ways. So I think this goes back to the poor management, but I think it also goes to the money that they're giving to Air Force ROTC and to the scholarship people. But yeah, I mean, the other thing you got to look at here is the second part of this has to do with the selection rate to field training this year.
Field training is a major milestone for Air Force ROTC, and it happens at Maxwell Air Force Base. It's a training program for rising juniors or rising AS300 cadets. And if you don't go to field training, you will not graduate, you will not commission as an Air Force ROTC officer. And this year, we only saw a 65% select rate for all cadets, including scholarship or non-scholarship, attending Maxwell and going to that field training, which means that there were many Air Force ROTC scholarship contracted cadets who lost their scholarship because they considered everyone scholarship or non-scholarship when thinking about that 65% selection rate. I don't think a lot of students saw it coming. So especially if you're on a type 1 scholarship at an expensive private institution and you lose that scholarship, well, you have some really tough decisions to make because now you're on the hook for the next 2 years should you decide to stay.
So they've been paying you, say, at MIT for 2 years at $80,000 a pop a year. So they put $160,000 into you for 2 years, and you've been taking electrical engineering there and got around a 2.9 GPA or a 3.0, and you're doing the best you can there. Air Force ROTC, that part of the selection for you to go on to the field training is your GPA, but also the way that your professor of aerospace science thinks you performed in the unit, and physical fitness is probably another one. And so you can imagine this person at MIT or some school that's on a type 1 or type 2 scholarship at some other school, taking engineering courses and just getting crushed, right? They may have taken the scholarship for an engineering major, but maybe they really wanted to be historians or wanted to be English majors, but they decided to do engineering because they could get the money, and they're getting crushed at a 2.9. They're spending all their time studying and not participating maybe as actively as they could in Air Force ROTC. And then meanwhile, you've got this non-scholarship person where the Air Force has put nothing into, not 90, not 180,000 or whatever. And they're a major that's easier, or they're doing a major that they're better at. They're getting a higher GPA. They're participating actively in Air Force ROTC. The professor of aerospace science loves this person and then gives them a great mark. So you got the dynamic where you got these two people, and the one that is the English major gets selected to go to the field training, and then a person that with a 2.9 GPA who's been crushed at MIT doesn't go. Air Force ROTC isn't even looking at the amount of money that has been put into this person over those 2 years. The selection rate is crazy low, but I mean, it's just crazy evaluating these people.
Definitely. The fact that they wouldn't even take whether or not you have a scholarship into consideration for that. It would make a lot more sense if they maybe decided, okay, we're going to drop maybe the bottom 2% of scholarship recipients, but to just blanket say, okay, it's a 65% selection rate and it doesn't matter if you received a scholarship or not, is just a huge waste of resources.
It's just a complete waste of money and resources. And what you're really seeing is really an impact, I think, on the morale of the cadets that are completely crushed by not being selected, and the parents. They say in the language when you accept the scholarship that this is no guarantee to go on to field training. But I mean, if the person's trying hard and doing the best that they can in a major that the Air Force wanted them to major in, and meanwhile you just completely crush them and have them leave the program, it just seems like also a huge waste of human talent. As an Army guy, I just shake my head when I see that there's people that are doing these things with Air Force ROTC after 2 years and are just being told to hit the road. And so you can imagine how that's affecting cadets. How is it affecting parents? What are parents telling other parents when their kid didn't get advanced and were trying their best? And so you see this on the posting boards. Now, this happened a few years ago. The same thing. I think it was like a 71% advanced rate. I think it was maybe 2019 or so. And a bunch of parents complained to their members of Congress, and the Air Force reversed some of their decisions and some of the people that had their scholarships who didn't make it to field training. So there has been that reaction in the past, but now we have another issue here now with that reaction. I don't really understand why the Air Force is just bleeding their talent like this and has such a low selection rate. Just getting back to the scholarship, just manages the scholarship in such a poor and haphazard way. Why would the Air Force Academy be your number one route to go for being an Air Force officer, and then Air Force ROTC being a backup? Why, Trish, why have we concluded, or we've come to this conclusion now after seeing Air Force ROTC perform over the last few years?
I'd like to speak to that as a grad who went through the same decision process of going to the Air Force Academy or the Air Force ROTC scholarship. And there's a few other reasons in addition to what Air Force ROTC is doing. First off, if you're seeking that discipline and military lifestyle where it's 24/7 instead of just 6 to 7 hours a week, and you don't have the traditional college experience, but you have amazing, incredible opportunities to learn and to develop the leadership skills required to be an Air Force officer. I mean, just the incredible opportunities that I had at the Air Force Academy, from going out and experiencing operations in the Air Force globally every summer. And you can compete for those opportunities within Air Force ROTC, but they're not guaranteed. To just the amazing speakers that we had to come and share their core values and what they had accomplished throughout their Air Force careers, the development opportunities with all the curriculum and the extracurriculars that they have there. And since I was an international relations study, the opportunity to study abroad in China and work on my Mandarin while I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy. And then the numerous opportunities to commission too. I mean, you just have so many more opportunities to get into the career field that you want to at the academy, because there's so many more slots for these things. If you're in the top half of the class, unless you're trying to do something super competitive like med school, you have a great shot at what you actually want to achieve. But looking at it now, holistically today, if I am advising a student as to whether or not to go to the Air Force Academy or Air Force ROTC, I'm looking at it through not only their experience, but like you mentioned, only 60 to 70 students were offered scholarships on that first board. And it seems like your chances of getting into the Air Force Academy are much higher. The similar scores that we've been suggesting people test for, getting that math SAT score up. And not only that, though, you are guaranteed, as long as you meet the requirements and you stay as a cadet in good standing, you are going to graduate from the Air Force Academy. No one is filtered out between sophomore and junior year. Now, some students choose to leave between sophomore and junior year at the academy because they feel like it's not right for them, but no one is forcing them out. And that's the big difference, is that there is no guarantee that you are going to make the cut line within Air Force ROTC. And that's a scary feeling, especially if you're going to a very expensive private school and you love it there and you want to stay. And all of a sudden you have this really tough decision to make about, okay, how do I graduate if I'm going to stay in this place? So you've built up this momentum, and that's what really irks me the most about this, is that Air Force ROTC is really just doing a disservice to the Air Force as a whole. It's a very bad taste for students who aren't in big Air Force yet. And they've already become salty. Even their peers, right, who potentially made it to that 65% selection rate. They went to AS 300 or to field training and became AS 300 cadets. But they saw their friends who worked very hard, who were great cadets, not get selected for various reasons.
Mm-hmm. And while I can't say for certain that they might plus up, maybe give you a little bit extra for being a technical major in this field training selection, it's still, a lot of it is based on your GPA and your professor of aerospace sciences recommendation. It's very, in some ways, arbitrary, the decision there. And yeah, it goes up and down each year. So 2019, it's 70%, then it goes up to 85. And now this year it's 65. And so what's it going to be next year? Is it going to be 50? Is it going to be 80? What is it going to be? And then why is it that this year it's 65? Is that just poor management from the Air Force, where you just cut people? And then next year, oh no, I mean, there's just too few, we cut too many people. So now we're going to jack it up to 80, 85%. And it crushes your scholarship, people who are taking these really difficult majors. And you can go to the Air Force Academy, major in English if you want to.
So if you're considering you want to be an Air Force or Space Force officer, we would strongly recommend that you consider applying to the Air Force Academy and Air Force ROTC. But if you do not receive an Air Force Academy appointment, we would take the scholarship and then reapply to the Air Force Academy the following year, because reapplicants, especially if they do well in Air Force ROTC in their first year, they have an excellent chance. So definitely something for you to consider if you are considering becoming an Air Force officer.
You get that guarantee at the Air Force Academy that you wouldn't get at Air Force ROTC. Now, I would say that this is not the same as Navy and Army. I mean, Navy and Army, you're not going to be rifted out like the Air Force, and you're going to be on the same footing in general as somebody who goes to West Point or the Naval Academy. This is only really Air Force ROTC. Now, just to regarding the services that we provide, we will help you get an Air Force ROTC scholarship, and we have the coaches that can do that, that can help you with that, including interview prep and other things that will enhance your ability to be able to get one of these scholarships. What we wanted to do here was just talk about where Air Force ROTC is at right now, where it's been over the past several years, and contrasting that with the Air Force Academy and what we see as advantages to going there if you want to be an Air Force officer compared to Air Force ROTC. It's not great news for Air Force ROTC. We don't understand why they're managing it the way that they're managing it, but this is what we do here at the Service Academy and ROTC Consulting. What we do is we're really on the forefront of just giving you the knowledge and the up-to-date news about these scholarships, and so that you can make an educated decision about where you want to go.
Definitely. I think honesty is key, and integrity is one of the Air Force core values, integrity first, and being 100% upfront about Air Force ROTC. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. They could cut down the number of scholarships. It's only getting more competitive, but you deserve to understand what you're committing yourself to. And if you accept that scholarship, the potential for that 65% selection rate might be there in 3 more years too. So we're trying to give you as much information to make an informed decision as possible.
Well, great, Trish. I wish we had better news about Air Force. So until next time, Trish, it was great talking with you, and we'll continue cranking these shows out here.
Until next time.